Hello, in this video I'm going to go through a bunch of photos that I took while I was building this thing, and I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. You can just pause the video if you want to see them a little bit slower, and I'll just mention something that comes to mind if there's anything interesting about any particular photo. And I also have a few little video snippets that I'm going to show as well, probably, and you'll just have to bear with me as I pull them in from the side of my screen here. There's a lot of photos, so let's get started. This is how I made the fuselage or sections, and this is just done by printing out the plans onto multiple pieces of paper and joining them up using these markers, and then I stuck them down with double-sided tape and glued them together, in this case with PVA wood glue, because these I was able to make them quite nice and close fitting like that thanks to the scroll saw. Actually was quite helpful for doing this because it makes a nice vertical 90-degree cut, much more so than you could with a handsaw. And then I put on some of them, I put these gusset pieces of plywood as well, just to make sure they were securely joined. This is not really related, but this is how I made that table saw. Oh, it is kind of related because I had to do that to make these stringers. So I wanted these to be, I think, 12mm wide, and because I probably should have made this saw going the other way, like here. Because what happens here is that without any support on this side, as you push a piece of wood through, it just sort of droops down on the floor there, and that's a problem. Normally that would be a problem, but it's more of a problem with this as well because these pieces are very light, and as they got to the rear side of the saw where the blade is coming up from under the table, they got pushed upwards. So that's why I have this sort of little frame to hold a piece of that high impact polystyrene. Came in quite handy, just to hold it down as it slid through. So that's my table saw, and then I started by making the vertical section of the main sort of box part, because it was the easiest bit to do. This is a piece of the tail, it goes together like that. It's the top and the bottom. This is, I think this is 25 by 25 square beam that I didn't show you in the last video, but I just used a small piece of that. This is the front. Originally I was thinking of putting a motor on here, and in this photo I'm just using it to get it vertical. Piece of the tail, sort of bits going together gradually. Okay, so we're on to the next folder. Alright, what have we got here? This is pieces of the wing going together, and you'll see I have a piece of baking paper under there because I'm using the aluminium angle, which will be the pieces that go on. Here we go. So this piece of aluminium is going to be attached to the fuselage, mostly permanently, and then the wings will slide into it. So I didn't want those pieces to be glued together, which is why there's baking paper going around and under there, and also around and under there like that. This is just sort of figuring out how the flaperons would move. I think there might be slightly different design there. Oh, that's that. Okay, what have we got here? Again, just sort of figuring out how the flaperons would be. And then what's next? Oh, okay, so that's the same pieces in carbon fiber. Again, same piece in carbon fiber, glued that on with epoxy. These pieces I glued on with wood glue. It's just reinforcement. This is a donation from a friendly bird. So this is some organic matter that has already been flying. So I thought, well, that's quite a good luck charm, isn't it? I'll just leave it there. These are the servos that I got, and they slot straight into one of the ribs right in the middle. And there's a lot of photos of that. I think I was pleased with how flush it ended up with the bottom of the wing, so I took lots of photos. Just a little bit of reinforcing on some of the ribs. And onto the next folder we have the wing coming together. Everything lined up very nicely. I was quite pleased with that. Alright, so we have a video here. What is this? Let me just see what this one is. Oh, this is just looking at how the wing how the ribs all lined up nicely. Unfortunately, it's quite hard to focus on a point 1.2 meters away and still keep the thing right in front of the camera in focus, so it didn't really work. Didn't really work out quite as nicely as I tried to video it, but this bit here actually lined up quite nicely as well, but once again it's quite hard to video. Yes, it's impossible to film. You can hear him saying it. Anyway, they line up quite nicely. What else do we got? Just stop that. Some pieces of aluminium, more wing going together. Pretty much done there, I think. Yep. What's next? Oh, video. Just looking at down the stringers to see how straight they are, I think. Not very exciting, those videos, are they? Alright, what have we got here? Okay, so the way that I mounted the control surfaces on the tail was using these ball bearings to hold the 10mm dowel. So these have an inside diameter of 10, and they just sort of press fit onto these dowels. It gets a little bit looser each time you do it, so I tried to not do it too much, but I think it'll still be fine. And then to hold them on to the stabilizers, I made these carbon fiber bits. This is all rather complex, and I'm not really very happy with it. I'm sure I could have come up with something better if I had have thought ahead a little more. But the bearings will go into these, and then hold on. Alright, we have another video. What is this? Oh, perfect. So this is just sort of showing how those pieces would fit together. So this hole here, when everything's put together, I'm thinking that I'll put a screw in this hole so that the wooden dowel can't slip out from this side. So hopefully if we have a look at some more photos, this will be a little bit clearer. Okay, things are a little bit out of order here. So at this time I started making, I got some of that extruded polystyrene insulation foam that we all love so much to do some hot wire cutting of, and I wanted to put those 10mm dowels into one side of it to become the control surfaces. So I cut out half of a dowel and put a bit of wire around it like that, and then that is right there in the middle of the table. And then I ran the I think this is 30mm thick piece of foam across that, and it turned out very nice once you get into the groove. And it occurred to me after I did this actually that I could get another one down here, because it's only 10mm diameter and this is 15mm, 30, so you can fit another one in there. So that's what I did, and that turned out very nicely. And then I cut that. I wanted to cut that to a 10mm width, so a 10cm width. So first thing I did to do that was this, and this didn't work out too well because I was pushing the foam off the edge of the bench, and that ends up with this. When you get to the end, it all goes well until you get to the end, and then you don't quite have the ability to hold it at right angles to the direction of movement. So you end up with that. So I decided to go back to what was working so well before, and I drilled a little hole around about the middle of the bench, and I set this up like that so it's in the middle. So now when I push the foam through on both sides, it's well supported, and there's aluminium angle here to let it slide smoothly and straightly through. Straightly? Yeah, whatever. And that, boys and girls, that is the way you do it. Look at that. Actually, looks a little bit hairy there, but it's not. I don't know why this photo shows it that way. But anyway, that was a really good way to do it. So after that, it occurred to me, I hadn't thought this all through ahead of time, but it all just sort of turned out very nicely. So now that I had that hole there, I thought, well, I can use that to make an angle like this, and cut the foam like that, push it through again. This particular one didn't turn out very well, but some of the other ones turned out a lot nicer than that. But what it gave me, yeah, this one turned out pretty good, I think, or was it this one? Whatever. But you can see where I'm going here. So I put my dowel in here, and then the dowel will ride on those bearings, and this will be the control surface that swivels on that. There we go, look at that. Ooh, so good. So the servos I got were those ones there, and they are, I think they're 8 kilo, and they're quite fast too. They're not the typical speed. They're a little bit faster. So I got some fairly nice servos, I think, and they're going to sit in here for the rear control surfaces like that. It was a little bit tight, but eventually got them in. Now, like I say, I hadn't thought some of these things ahead very well, so I wasn't exactly sure how these servos were going to sit on there. So I ended up with this piece of strut in the way, so I just cut it out. And I did, of course, cut that strut out completely later on, but anyway, so it fits in there. I'm not too excited about having the servos at the back because they do put a bit of weight. They're 55 grams each, so that's 110 grams of weight right out on the tail, which is not that great. And in hindsight, I think what I would do if I was doing this again is I would make a pull-pull system for both of them, because what I'm going to do is use just the typical push rod thing that we do on most of our smaller size planes, which is probably not such a great idea, but I'm hoping that it's not going to give me any trouble. The push rods I'm going to use are 3mm diameter steel rods, so they're not going to be bending much, but nevertheless it would be nicer to have a pull-pull system, I think, and then I could put these much further forward. So to mount those little bits of carbon fiber for the hinges, I have a couple of holes like that. This one's going to go right down the middle of there. Well, it's only 12mm or something in, and then the carbon fiber mounts on there like so, and this gives the dowel the functionality of a hinge. And right about the middle somewhere there we have to cut out a little bit. So again, I didn't really think too far ahead, but this little reinforcing bit here should take care of this cutout being weakening that area, hopefully. Alright, so we're back at the beginning of that. Another video. Oh, this is just showing the how the hinges work. What's next? Okay, so that's that bit cut out there. There's actually quite a bit that I had to cut out, which was a shame, but had to be done. I'm sure I could come up with something better than that if I was doing it again too. So from the middle of the elevator we need to cut out a section so that the rudder can move in the middle, so I just chopped out a big piece like that, and then again it needs to be a little bit more at an angle 45 degrees so that the rudder can move in there. And on the edge of these I cut them down a little bit, and this is, I think it's 3mm by 0.5mm carbon strip, and just so that it meets up with the edge of the control surface I just cut it at that point there, about 3mm thickness, and stuck it on the top of the edge like that. And then I covered this with that flimsy covering foam. It actually stiffens these up quite nicely, so yeah, turned out pretty good actually. For the rudder I needed to add a little bit of wood here because it needs to be parallel with the top of the rudder, and this is the bottom of the plane here. It's at an angle, so it wasn't going to work as is. So here you can see that's the top of the rudder, vertical stabilizer. This piece needs to be parallel with this piece if you want this to turn properly. So that's what that extra bit of wood there is for. So that's how it looks, and we're back to the beginning of that. Okay, we have a video. What is this? Oh, this is just looking at the elevator turning. Lovely. What's next? Oh, another video. This is the hinge for the wing. It's a little bit different. It's going to ride on. Oh, actually, I haven't thought about this too much, but I'm thinking just to put in some screws like that. Yeah, I'll have to think about that a bit more, but you can see how it moves like that. And this is just showing how the rudder, the elevator needs a bit cut out of it for the rudder thing to move into. This is looking at the flaperon again, getting an idea of how it will move. Okay, some photos. That's the flaperon. I only have one of these made at the moment. That's the rudder. Sits on there like that. Looks pretty good. Same thing with the flaperon. I put a carbon strip on it. Lines up pretty nicely. Okay, next. Is anybody still watching this? Hope so. Alright, I covered that. Okay, that is the rudder. Put a little bit of... Yeah, this I don't like this too much because I had to cut out a chunk of this to get that carbon fiber bearing block thing on there. And it started to look a bit ugly and probably a little bit weak there too, so I put an extra piece of carbon strip along there. And then I wanted to try and make this a balanced rudder with a little bit more out the front, just to give a little bit more air catching ability. So I put one of the half round pieces of foam that was cut out of here, I glued that back in, and then it looks like we're a little bit out of order here, but there's a video. We're getting all mixed up, but what is this showing? Oh, this is just showing how that moves. I think I had a better one of that. Yeah. So as you can see, when it goes up, it sort of closes that gap. I'm not sure if that's really ideal or not. And when it goes down, it opens the gap more. Yeah. Something like that. Okay, so to fill in the center of the rudder and the horizontal stabilizer, I wanted to cut that foam in half widthwise. Widthwise? I don't know. I wanted to cut it from 30mm thick to 15mm thick or so. So I did this trick again with the wire coming up through a hole in the bench. Put a little bit of aluminium across here just to sort of stop the wood from charring too much, and screwed these blocks into the table and put some weight on it from the bottom like that. Yeah, electricity through there. And this worked out quite nicely as well, especially because you're pushing through the wire that way, so it tends to bow out in that direction, which is orthogonal to the direction that it's being held. So the fact that it's bowing out that way doesn't actually matter. It doesn't make any difference to the height of the cut. Well, it does a little bit if you go too fast, which I think is what happened there. But again, when you get in the groove, this turns out really good. So that let me cut a big slab of this in half that way. Is it width-wise, thickness-wise, whatever? You can see what I mean. So then I cut the interior shape of the horizontal stabilizer like that, and the rudder, and I put some pieces in there like that. And this did unfortunately add a reasonable amount of weight, so 26. So this is 52 grams for the interior there, which is, yeah. But it does make it really strong. I'm sure this is going to be quite hard to break, because it has this wooden frame around it, and the wooden frame, this foam is quite hard to compress, so the wooden frame doesn't really have anywhere to go if it takes an impact from the outside. So yeah, it will be heavy, but it should be quite strong. Yeah. So that's 313 grams. It looks like this is the horizontal stabilizer there. Okay, what else have we got? Did we look at this video? What is this? Oh, this is just... Yeah, so I glued... Yeah, here we go. So I glued another piece onto the front of the rudder there to extend that forwards a bit. Like that. What's this? Oh, this is just a photo I took to show somebody in the comments of one of the videos the other day. And moving right along, yes, I chopped the rudder tip off there like that, and again wasn't thinking too far ahead with this, and I had to cut out another piece so that this control horn would be able to move or rotate around forwards a bit. And I also made a mistake in that I put this a little bit too low, and it should have been more about here, especially now that I want to cut out a piece, and I would rather cut out a piece here where there's more material there than here where there's not much. So I quite messily shoved it forward. These were not glued in, by the way, yet, so it was fairly easy to move it around, and then I just cut that piece out there, rounded off the tip, put another bit of carbon on it, and that's what it looks like there. Okay. Alright, so this is the second wing now, and I was able to make this in not quite one day, but almost one day, because this time I knew what I was doing, and I was able to just lay out the plans and cut them and put it all together without having any sort of confusion or indecisiveness about what I was doing. And I didn't mention this before, but the spar is made up from, I think this is 25 by 12 angle aluminium, 1.4 millimeters thick, I think, and I've glued that in with ADOS glue, which glues these together fairly well. I didn't really want to use epoxy because it's a lot of area to glue, and epoxy is a little bit expensive, and it's hard to get that much epoxy on something without it sort of already starting to harden at the other end before you get to the other end of it. And Gorilla Glue might have been okay too, but anyway, ADOS works. So this hopefully should be quite a strong structure, and this is of course going to be going in the wing from top to bottom like that. And now that I knew how many pieces I needed and which they were going to be, see these are all slightly different there, this bit here where the spars go through, this is a little bit wider to fit the channel, this one here is narrower because it's only the wood, and I was able to get them all onto a nice piece of wood like that. Unfortunately this piece of wood, I'd had it outside for quite a while, or not outside but in the garage, which is kind of outside, and it bent a little bit, which was kind of a bummer because I didn't realize it until I was starting to glue the second wing together, but I don't think it'll be an issue. Alright, are we there yet? Alright, so yeah, I cut these all in one session, so I was able to get through them a lot quicker. Plus I was more experienced with using the scroll saw now, so yeah, I was able to get things done quite a bit quicker the second time around. So you can see here when you put them all together where the aluminium channel is going to go up to. So the first three have the channel, then the next four I guess have no, next three have the rest of the spar, and then the last two just have the wood only. And this is how the tail of, or the trailing edge, will be reinforced in each case. This is the tail pieces with covering on them. Turned out reasonably well. That's just the reinforcing bits being glued on, and I think we've seen those. We must be just about there now. Oh, this is a video that I took. I was gonna I think I have another one of these too. Yeah, I was gonna make a time lapse of me cutting some pieces out, so you'll just have to pretend this is a time lapse. Here we go. Look. See that? It's a time lapse. Cut, 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 cut. But yeah, I was able to do one of these in about probably, yeah, not that quick really. Like about 15 minutes maybe? Nah, somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes to do one of these ribs, but yeah, not terrible. Okay, so I think that is the end of my photos. So now I'll just finish off with a bit of video that I took today looking around the plane as I have put it together and in the current state that I have now. Obviously not finished yet, but let's have a look at it anyway. So this is the point that I'm at the moment, and you can see it takes up a fair bit of the garage. Obviously still a ways to go, but gives you an idea of how big it's going to be. And as far as lining everything up, it's turned out really good. Haven't had any major issues with getting anything in the wrong place. It's pretty heavy, like I say. Not too happy about the weight, but I think it's going to be quite strong, and it should handle a crash pretty well if it ever comes to that. Hopefully not. Still not quite finished there with some screws to hold the spars in there. And I think I'm going to use some U-bolts around here, maybe here, oh no, I guess around here, and so the middle section of the channel comes out there, so probably another U-bolt around there, and then the U-bolts, the bolt end of the U-bolt will have to stick out below the wing so that you can slide the spar in, or slide the wing into the channel rather. Yeah, it's going to look a bit ugly there, but hopefully it should just be a matter of 2 bolts sticking out below the wing there to clamp it together, and maybe a little bit of aluminium across the top here so that the wood doesn't get crushed. But that's the point that I'm at the moment. I haven't really decided how I'm going to do that. I think I'll just weigh this, what this weighs here. Keep in mind we're missing one aileron still, flaperon rather. What else to say? What to tell about this plane? Just in case I didn't explain elsewhere how this would be dismantled for transport and how everything fits together. Hopefully I'm not going to have to take the tail apart to transport it. It will just be the wings only. But so that piece of plywood sits flat on the top of the fuselage like this onto that flattened off area there, and screws down with 6 screws there, and then the vertical stabilizer will go, see that screw there, and that little bit there will go into the hole there, and then that screw will go into that hole there, and that will slot into there. So a little bit hard to do with one hand, but the more I do it, the easier it slots in. So it's not quite in there, but it's close enough. And then the horizontal elevator still has a little bit of space in there to rotate. I'm not too happy about this not being supported here because it is a little bit flexible, although if all you're doing is trying to move it by the control horn, it's not too bad. But that might need to be reinforced a bit in future there. See that? And I had to cut away a fair bit here, probably already showed you that, just to make sure nothing was going to hit when the rudder turns to the right like that. And to mount the wing, these 2 spars will slide into here and this channel respectively, and then over here you're probably going to need a bolt going through here like that just to stop them from sliding out that way, but then there will of course be the U-bolts to clamp them, and at the back there will be screws going through there, and underneath here there are some aluminium back plates to just stop the wood from being crushed too much, and also there as well, you can't quite see it. This is slightly less convenient because it means these these screws are going to have to be taken down like that, all the way down, so that the spar can slide in and then pushed back up again, which is a little bit inconvenient. And then over the top of that I'm going to have this, so it'll be completely boxed in by a aluminium piece on the top as well, so it should be quite nice and strong. Not foreseeing any issues with strength, and it shouldn't be too annoying to assemble before flying either. One thing I'm not super happy about though is the way the main spar is attached. So there's a screw here going through a fairly small piece of wood, and that hole takes quite a bit out of this wood. It's only 12mm wide and it's a 3mm hole, so there's only 9mm left, and there's another one here and another one there, and underneath there's a piece of aluminium, fairly large one, going along like that as a washer, I guess you could say, just to make sure that that load is spread a little bit further than just where the screw is. But all the same, that means that the entire weight of the fuselage and the tail and the undercarriage and the batteries and everything, the motors, oh not motors, the motors will be on the wings, but everything else is going to be held up just by these 3 screws. So I'm not too happy about that, but I'm optimistic that it won't give me any trouble. The other thing that sort of concerns me a little bit is that there's not that much distance between the back of the wing and the tail. So it's a fairly short tail. But if the mini talon is anything to go by, I don't think that'll be a huge issue. And the tail is fairly sizable, don't you think? I mean, and the control surface on the tail is decently sized, I think. I wouldn't want it to be much smaller, put it that way. And likewise, this is probably sufficient as well. So yeah, that's where we're at the moment. So, like it says in the title, predictions. What do you think? So it's going to be 7 kilos. Thrust is, if the thrust test on that RC Groups thread is anything to go by, each of the motors, if I do go with the 2-motor setup, which I'm pretty sure I will, each of the motors could potentially give almost 3 kilos of thrust at full throttle. So that would be 6 kilos of thrust for a 7 kilo plane, which is totally viable, but whether it's going to be much of a short takeoff, I don't know. And wing area, if I haven't shown you already somewhere else in the video, actually forgot what it was. By the way, can we count the flaperon as part of the wing area? Because it's bloody massive. That would, I think we can, kind of, because it is part of the wing area, really, isn't it? That would increase the or decrease the wing loading a lot if we counted that. Well, I haven't really been counting that so far. Yeah. Anyway, I think I'll probably finish the video here. You've probably seen and heard enough already. Yeah, I'd just be interested to see or hear any predictions of what people who are a bit more experienced with this kind of thing might have to predict. Will it fly? Will it stall? Will it break? Will the wings fold up? Will it just be too heavy to get off the ground? Is 6 kilos thrust for a 7 kilo plane going to be alright? Just any sort of predictions you have, because I'm sort of at the predicting things myself stage at the moment, so I don't really have a lot else to tell you, and now I'm just completely just rambling. So yeah. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Hopefully we'll see it flying pretty soon.